Hello guys and welcome back to the Traitors New Zealand, and today we're jumping into episode 5. Now, this episode is a frustrating one. It has a frustrating round table. The challenge was good. There's lots of suspicions flying around, but I just feel like some of the traitors, one in particular, is getting a little bit too big for their boots and is trying to do too much, and is going to cause them to get exposed. And it's disappointing because they had a good thing going, and if they didn't do what they did in this episode, I think that they all could have made it a lot further in this episode. But anyway, we are going to jump into the episode discussion. I'm super excited. I know you guys are too. So let's get going. So breakfast was a chaotic affair. Lots of people are believing different things. There's a group of people that still genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that there is at least one traitor in the group. So whoever comes back through today is the traitor. And I just think, how naive and stupid do you need to be to not realize that this is all a setup? This is all a setup to make you guys go after people who are suspicious but faithful. That's what they've done here. Donna herself came in and was like, I never believed it was Andrew, but I do wholeheartedly believe that the traitors are starting to slip up now, and Noah's revealed himself. It's not Noah, it's Noel. I keep writing Noah in my notes, but it's Noel. I'm getting annoyed now. I'm getting annoyed with myself. I keep making silly mistakes like that. Jesus Christ. Then we had my favourite line of the whole episode where Jason genuinely deadpan to a camera goes, "This game is harder than life." And I was like, okay, cool. Don't really know what to do with that information, but thanks for that one, bestie. Then we have Ciale is still fuming with Noel over the fact he's still being there. Donna kept on wittering on about how, like, oh, yeah, it has to be one of the three. It has to be one of the three. And I just sit there and I think, how dumb can you actually be to not even entertain the alternative, which is none of them were traitors? That seems like the most logical thing. Because then you got Stephen going, well, yeah, actually, I think that three faithfuls were picked. And I actually think that they are genuinely all faithful. And they're being played off as the targets by the traitors. And we should be looking at who's trying to push to get rid of these guys as the traitors. And I'm sitting there going, Stephen has his head screwed on. I'm impressed. Okay, let's go. But who was he telling this to? Mike, who is a traitor, and Whitney, who is also a traitor. So this didn't go very well for him, I can't lie. I have a feeling that he could potentially be a target, so that's interesting. But last but not least, we have Brittany, who believes that Whitney is a traitor, and she's right, but like, I feel like her logic is kind of flawed a little bit. Just a little bit. So, unfortunately, Chaos has left the building, and by Chaos, I mean Bree. Bree, you are a fascinating person in the first 4 episodes. Every round table, you brought something up that was crazy, diabolical, it twisted people's minds, it caused chaos, it just caused confusion more than anything. And you were the perfect sort of like faithful to have in the game to really mix things up, and I'm really upset that they put those 3 in there and didn't have like one boring person that they could have just chopped anyway. I feel like that would have still had the intended effect if they left Bree out potentially, or left Noel out and put somebody else in and had sort of Andrew and Bree going up against each other. I feel like that would have been good, because then you still would have had the scapegoat in Bree, but you would have had somebody else to have murdered that night, and I feel like that kind of backfired for them. But that's just my personal opinion. It's not how I would have played the game, but we got to work with what we got. Do you know what I mean? Noel did survive, and I feel like he's even more determined to win now for Bree. And the fact that he walked in, he was like, guys, I'm clearly being set up. Let's be honest. It's a little bit too perfect that the one person that is the most suspicious person in the entire game is the one that was left alive, and Bree is the one that went home. Do you see what I mean? It's just too perfect. It's not working out how you want it to. So I'm going to talk about the mission first of all. The mission was very interesting. They were asked to volunteer for people, and Joe, Noel, Mark and Mike all volunteered to be locked in boxes for the other team to basically unlock them. They were split into 4 groups of 4, and then I guess 4 groups of 3 once the people were in the boxes, and they had to like put their hands into these boxes and feel around for numbers. There was like mouse traps in one of them and spikes, and then in another it was like tomato soup, I guess, and then in another it was like meat and hair. I was a bit confused about that one. I was like, this is just it's just a sensory nightmare for me. But I have to say, I think that this entire challenge was actually highly exhilarating and highly entertaining. But people did piss me off with how they approached the challenge. There were 4 numbers to find in 3 boxes, and most of the groups went down to go input the numbers without the 4th number. If I have the 3 numbers, I'm not running back up to check. There's only 9 numbers that it can be. So therefore, I'm just going to be like trial and error in it. That's exactly what James' group did. And they ended up winning the shields. So I was a little bit like, I feel like you guys didn't correctly use your time. And it did wind me up a little bit. And I was a bit like, did annoy me. Because I would have just sat there fiddling with the dials. If we have 3 out of 4 of the numbers, there's only so many combinations it can be. And by the time we've run back up and down, I could have cracked the safe by then. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like they didn't approach this in the smartest way possible. This challenge was also only for $4,000, which is a little bit stingy, I can't lie. Like, I was really expecting there to be more of a prize pot, but so far we're at like 34,500, I think. And I just feel like that's not good enough after episode 5. Sort yourself out, New Zealand. Come on. I know you're not exactly putting the most money into this production, but at least give us the illusion that you are. Come on. So I actually don't know who got the shields in the end, because they kind of decided amongst themselves, but then we're like, oh, wow, we're all just going to get them ourselves. I'm fairly certain it was Kat and Donna that got them, but I could be absolutely wrong. But what I want to talk about before we head into the round table is a disastrous game move from Mike. Okay, so I've spoken before about when is the perfect time to turn on your fellow traitors. And the perfect time to turn on your fellow traitors is when somebody else is leading the charge. Okay, and then you apply the pressure on top of that. Think back to season 2 of the UK version, right? Paul turned on Miles and got him voted out. But Paul was leading that charge. And then in the next round table, they went, well, you led that charge. You could be a traitor, getting him out. And who jumped onto that bandwagon once somebody else was already leading that charge? Harry. Harry jumped on the bandwagon along with multiple other people, because if you're leading the charge against a fellow traitor, it only looks suspicious on you when they're voted out. And especially with the kind of evidence that he was bringing up, I was sitting here going, bro, you ain't even got any evidence saying that she's a traitor. All you've got evidence on is that she might be lying about her profession. That's not indicative of her being a traitor. There's a lot of people who are probably lying about certain things in their life. Somebody's lying about their fucking name. Okay? So are we going to call them a traitor as well? No, of course we're not. So I feel like this whole thing was premeditated because he knows that she's a traitor. He's doing the exact same thing as Sam in Australia Season 2, although not as egregiously because, again, Mike had some evidence, whereas Sam was just like, trust me, bro, she's a traitor. Trust me, bro, Ash is a traitor. Trust me, bro. I hate trust me, bro mentalities, honestly. Absolutely pisses me off. But he's going around and he's targeting people that are already unsure of Whitney, the people who were in the group challenge with her yesterday, the people who are against her, like Brittany. He's masterminded it so that he has the numbers to get rid of her, but he hasn't protected himself. He thinks that he's made this mastermind move, but I don't think he has. I think, if anything, him gunning for Whitney is going to backfire against him, because it always, always does. There has never been a single moment in the history of this game where a traitor has led the charge against another traitor and gotten away with it. gotten away with it scot-free. I'm fairly certain. Did Wilf get away with it in season 1 with Alyssa? Or was somebody else onto Alyssa first and he just dropped the bomb? I can't remember, guys. But I'm fairly certain if you're the only person leading the charge against somebody and you manage to convince people and then they are a traitor, that ends up making you look suspicious. It's better if it's a group effort, do you know what I mean? Yeah, this round table was frustrating to say the least. Because I'm sat here and I'm like, your evidence just isn't there in the slightest. So Mike comes straight out the gate and he goes, yo, Whitney, I think you're a traitor because you were in that challenge yesterday and you're meant to be not a mortician, she's an undertaker, okay? She's an undertaker and she's an embalmer. So she handles human organs and she handles other things to do with death. She's not a mortician. She's not anything like that. She is an undertaker. She plans funerals and she also embalms bodies, okay? So when he's calling her out for not knowing the difference between a cow's lung and a cow's hoof, now this really wound me up because he kept on saying cow's hoof, but she didn't write cow's hoof. She wrote cow's foot, okay? And you can argue against the wall that they are synonymous, but I think in her head, when she wrote that, she's imagining, oh, they're not going to give me a fucking chopped off cow's leg. They're going to skin it and they're going to give me the sort of muscle and fat and sinew and all of that. They're not going to give me a hoof so that I can easily identify it. Do you know what I mean? Yes, it was ridiculous that she went for a foot. We get that. But equally, I don't know how successful I would be with feeling body parts and knowing what they are. Do you know what I mean? She's also an embalmer. So yes, she does handle human organs. And she made this point. They were like, what do you have to say about that? And she was like, animals are different to humans. Like, I don't know what to tell you. This is such a bullshit way of outing me as a traitor. And you found like the littlest thing and you've thrown it out there. And I also thought it was a little bit bold of him to come in and insult her knowledge of her profession. I thought that was actually quite bold of him to be like, I think you're completely lying about your job and you're a bullshitter. And she's like, no, I actually am an undertaker. What are we doing here, guys? Like, actually, what are we doing here? This whole thing was just so frustrating. Then he's like turning it up and he's like, oh, when people get voted out, your fake crying doesn't fool me. And I'm like, where are you getting all of this from? Where have you got the audacity to come out with all of this bullshit and not expect people to go, well, I haven't thought that her crying was fake, so why do you think her crying is fake? What do you know that we don't? I just feel like this whole thing is going to backfire so spectacularly onto Mike because he hasn't protected himself well enough. He should have let Brittany lead the charge against Whitney. And then he could have backed her up and been like, well, actually, I did feel like this, XYZ. But the fact that he was so gung-ho about, you're a traitor, that is what's going to get him voted out of this game. If he makes it past the next couple of episodes, I'm going to be shocked. I'm going to be shocked and appalled at these traitors. No, at these faithful for letting him through this game. Because, big up my girl Whitney. She was actually playing a very good game. No one was suspicious of her, really, apart from Brittany. Until Mike started going around and being like, oh, wow, she doesn't know the difference between a cow's hoof and a cow's lungs? That's mental. And I was like, who cares? Like, actually, who cares? I don't personally, so who cares? So then Whitney was asked, who are your suspicions on? And she went, well, my suspicions are on Brittany. And I just think that she could potentially have been a traitor trying to get out another traitor to earn the respect of everyone in this room so that they didn't think that she was a traitor. And this was obviously alluding to the fact that Brittany was quite gung-ho that it was Jackie. And again, that's not a bad defense, actually. And then Brittany's like, oh, wow, you and Jackie had a smear campaign against me. So maybe you're both traitors working together. And again, I'm sitting there thinking, if I was sat around that table, I'd be going, well, don't you think that's a little bit too obvious for two traitors to be actively working together against the same person? Does that not seem a little bit too obvious to you? Obviously they were, but I'm fairly certain that they both had that thought about Brittany separately, and then they came together and were like, oh yeah, we're actually both suspicious of her. Even though they're both traitors. But yeah, you get my point. Like, I feel like nobody is willing to look at the other side of things. Everybody's like, oh, well, you must be a traitor. You must be. But nobody's willing to look at the flip side of things. Same with Noel. They're not willing to look at the fact that he could potentially be a faithful that has been set up in this way. So, yeah. There was also a faux pas that caught my attention that I don't think anybody else noticed. But when Whitney was talking about the fact that she observes, she doesn't really like to verbalize her thoughts because she can sometimes get a little bit muddled. She then said something along the lines of like, we should be observing, we should be looking, we should be doing X, Y, Z. That's what the faithful, and then she paused and went, we should be doing. And I was like, oh, she caught herself because she was about to say, that's what the faithful should be doing. And that sounds a little bit too third person-y. And it makes her sound like a traitor. But then she corrected herself and went, we. And I really thought someone was going to call her out. And not a single person did. So I was like, oh, wow. And then the last thing that happened around this round table was Donna and Ciale dragging on Noah. Not Noah. No. Fuck, I did it again. Guys, this is actually an issue. And I just felt like, again, they're acting based off of no indication whatsoever. Apparently, Noah had a slight smile after Andrew got voted out. And he was like, well, I think you would too if you came that close to going home. You'd be happy that you're still in the game. And I was like, yeah, fair point. Fair point. And then I entered this round table going, well, the only two names that have been brought up are Whitney, Brittany, like very, very briefly, and then Noah. Noel. Fuck's sake, guys. This is actually an issue. This is actually an issue. This is why I should be trusted to write notes on the show. So, voting time went as follows. Whitney voted for Noel. Bailey voted for Noel. Ben voted for Whitney. Molly voted for Whitney. Ciale voted for Whitney. Mark voted for Noel. Jane voted for Whitney. Kat voted for Whitney. Joel voted for Whitney. Mike voted for Whitney. Donna voted for Noel. Stephen... Mark? I was like, what? What are we doing here? What's happening here? Brittany voted for Whitney. Utah voted for Whitney. Utah, you know what I mean. Jason voted for Noel, and then Noel voted for Whitney. So by the end of that, I think she had well the majority of the votes. It was actually kind of crazy. And it's so frustrating to me because, again, Mike, I have to hand it to you. A flawless execution with flawed logic. I was very, very impressed with that. But I don't feel like you've done enough to protect yourself. Because when they're all cheering and they're all like, yeah, let's go, let's go, let's go. Jane goes over to Mike and goes, yeah, come here, boy. Pulls him into a hug and goes, yeah, we need to fucking talk, boy. And I was like, Jane's not happy. Jane is not happy in the slightest. Jane's just been blindsided by Mike getting rid of another traitor. And now she's thinking, I could be next. So I'm hoping, Jane, work your magic. Sprinkle some dust. I need to see you win. I need to see you win against Mike because I can't have this melon leading the game now. Actually frustrating. Because even up in the tower, he's straight up lying about the fact that him and Whitney had an alliance, but he didn't trust her. And now he wants... And they wanted to cut Jane, or Whitney wanted to cut Jane. He's straight up lying about all this. And Jane's like, I don't think she's buying it. But equally, she has to listen to him out. Because otherwise, she could be next. I don't know. I'm a little bit... Oh, I don't know how I feel about this. Mike, you're playing a very, very dangerous game. I hope it works out for you, but I don't think it will. But that is all we got time for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Please do all of that YouTube stuff that you guys do so well. And I will see you next Saturday for another episode of The Traitors. But until then, make sure to keep on ranting. And I'll see you guys later. Bye now. See ya.